Welcome to Paperweights, the podcast where two self-proclaimed gym rats and shooting enthusiasts delve into the world of literature with a sprinkle of humor. Although their biceps could crush a walnut, don't let that intimidate you. They also have a nerdy side. Mike and Brandon have a voracious appetite for reading, particularly in the fantasy genre, and they want to share their passion with you. So grab your protein shake and your favorite novel and join us for a humorous and insightful journey into the world of books with Paperweights.
Welcome back to another episode of the Paperweights. I'm Brandon.
And I am Mike.
And today we are finishing up C.S. Friedman's space opera in Conquest Born. I figured I'd treat you to a little bit of my operatic performance before we got into it.
It's an excellent way to start.
It is.
And, very excellent way to start.
Yes. We unfortunately we don't necessarily have a structured podcast.
It's structured-ish.
Yeah.
So. There's some structure there. Dude, this book, like the ending of this book that's probably the fastest I've read. What was like 100 pages at the end?
Yeah.
That's probably the fastest I've read 100 pages of any book ever. Because it just like that last section.
I told you that whenever I told you I was done, you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I better start reading. And I was like, I couldn't put it down.
Yeah, like I've read it in one sitting. Like I sat down, started reading, and then whenever it was done, I was like, oh wow, I didn't move. Like that was just nuts.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of focus and control, but I read it
probably
in one day.
It probably took me 90 minutes to read it. Like 2 hours at the most.
90 minutes is fast.
I seriously was
pages.
I was seriously like legit page turner. Yeah, like I don't think it was longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, the page. So a lot of the book just set it up.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to get right into it?
Let's dive into it, man.
All right. So chapter 23, right?
Yeah.
All right. So chapter 23. We cut to Zatar, and he is on the planet Barrows, or rather the moon Barrows, which we haven't seen before. By the end of the book, we know more about Barrows, but it is where Harker was stationed before the planet Jean was ready for inhabitation.
Yeah.
And so he goes there and he's looking through the historical Braxi, he's looking through all the history of Braxi, trying to find information. And since now he's the sole ruler of Braxi, just like Harker was at the beginning, he goes to Harker's hunting palace, which is in like disarray. It's almost destroyed.
Yeah, nobody had used it since Harker left it.
Right.
Like it had not been touched ever again since then.
Yeah, so they go down in the basement and he finds a painting, or rather he's brought a servant brings him to the painting. And so like he had people go do basically an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
Found information and artifacts, and then brought Zatar there because it was an interesting find. And we discover it's a painting, and that so Zatar had never seen any likeness of Harker before, apparently.
Right. Nobody had.
Or a true likeness of them.
Right. Which we find out later the reasoning why, but like at that point, like nobody really knew what the dude looked like.
Right. And so we still didn't find out in this chapter what he looked like, except that Zatar was shocked,
visibly shaken,
and embarrassed, and to contain this information from getting out, he was like, told the messengers like, "Hey, you realize I have to kill you, right?"
Yeah, and the messenger's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, "I'm gonna make sure your family's taken care of." Blah blah blah. And the messenger's like, "Well, can I say something?" He's like, "Sure, but you realize I'm the only person that's gonna hear it, right?"
Right. Yeah, it's literally the embodiment. Like it, and because at first even he was like, why are the, why is the main archaeologist not coming with me? Like, why are they just sending this messenger? And then he was so visibly shaken by the picture that he's like, I got to kill you now, right?
Yes.
It's
So
like, oh, that's why they just sent that guy.
so they the archaeologist, but he so when I read it, the messenger I thought was like the only other person that saw the painting.
Yeah. So no, it was him, basically the site lead. There was like 4 people that had seen it.
Okay.
But it wasn't because he asked him like basically right before
So the messenger wasn't the only person that was killed?
No, the messenger was the only one that was killed because he's the only one that saw Zatar's reaction to it. Because Zatar was so visibly shaken
so
by this picture. It wasn't the picture itself that got him killed. It was Zatar's reaction. It was basically, a reaction unbecoming to the leader of the Braxton people.
It portrayed him in a less than stoic manner.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
It showed him as being weak and being overtaken with emotion. So that's why he killed the messenger. It wasn't because of the actual picture.
Gotcha. Yeah, so there's some reason I thought it was because of the picture. I did pick up that he was embarrassed by his reaction. But for some reason I didn't put those together.
Yeah, so at the top of 403, he said, how many people know? He said the site director, the archaeologist concerned, myself, all sworn to secrecy.
Gotcha.
So so it was the whole idea of him being so visibly shaken. He said he looked at the man, his image had collapsed and he knew it. It felt strangely naked to be merely human, a creature rendered helpless by surprise like everyone else. So that's why he killed the guy.
Yeah, and reading that, like being human and being naked.
Yeah.
Later on, was it Ansha or Farron that mentioned they were talking about a race that was completely, had killed out the telepaths and telepathy, except for in the manner of charisma or Braxton. So the Braxy image.
I think that was Ansha, and she was kind of saying that that was like one trait that was probably mistaken for something that was not caught on as being like a psychic trait, was that they had basically forced that one trait so deep into their genetics that it was their level of charisma. Because like, even if you think about it, like every time somebody sees them, they're like drawn to them. They can't believe they basically want to be with these people, the Braxton master race.
Yeah,
and so she was basically calling them out, saying that y'all bred this in no different than psychic traits.
I took it a further step than that it is a form of psychic trait. It's a power over others.
Yeah, I wasn't like explaining myself well, but I fully agree with you.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's funny. I wrote at the end of this chapter, I was like, wait, was Harcourt an Azean? Because the only clue we got was that he was surprised at the appearance of Harcourt, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, is Harcourt like Azean? And of course, later on, we find out that he's not really Azean, because at the time of Harcourt, Asia didn't exist,
Right.
but he is inadvertently the creator.
Mm-hmm.
He is the founder of the Azean race.
Yeah.
He, yeah,
because this was before they started trying to like breed in certain traits.
right.
So yeah, it was definitely interesting.
I mean, yeah, and Harker was very. So I like the contrast. That's later on. We'll talk about that later on. Right as of at the end of that chapter, we didn't know much more about Harker.
Right, and I will say this too before we move on. I found it interesting at the time and understood later why Zatar looks back at the painting and says Hassa, which was something that usually only the Asians really talked about. So I was like,
Hasha.
Yeah, well, Hasha, Hassa, whatever. Yeah, Hasha. So I thought that was interesting that he would say that. And it obviously it became clear later, but
right. So chapter 24. This one was the beginning of this was very confusing to me. I don't know if it was confusing to you.
Oh, 100%.
So there's star control officers. We get the first point of view of the star control officers on Lurian.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, so I was reading it, they notice a ship. Okay, so they noticed a ship coming through with Conqueror credentials.
Right.
And I at first thought if the ship was actually coming into the station and they were assuming it was for repairs.
Right.
But later on, we find out the Conqueror itself was at the station for repairs.
Right.
And this starship was just going by and came really close to the station.
Right. And it was going, they didn't like how fast it was going.
Right. It was going super fast, got really close. As in Star Wars, they would say, I don't know, fly casual.
Right.
So she was flying a little too casual. Jettisoned herself out of the ship at a certain point.
Right.
At which point it made the space station, their sensors not detect that it was something abnormal.
Right. They thought it was just the vapor trail, basically.
Right. And she shut off. She was in a artificial skin.
I took it to I pictured like an old school spacesuit, like what we would see, like because she said it was like the first person in like 10,000 years to use that.
Right.
So I took it to almost be like what our astronauts would use for spacewalking.
Yeah, agreed.
She mentioned how big the gloves were and how stuff was very hard to use.
And there was a generator on it.
Yep.
Which she ended up turning off after hitting a little air thing to shoot her towards the space station. She started using one of the disciplines to block out her thoughts so that nobody on the space station could detect her. So it was confusing at first. And then as I kept reading, it started to make more sense.
Right.
Because I knew she was going there to steal something.
Yeah.
But I was confused as to, she was in a ship. And then she was out of a ship. And then she was in the space station. And then she got in another ship. And then she took off.
Right.
Like, wait.
Yeah.
Why didn't you just take the ship?
Well, I don't think she actually went in the space station physically. I think she went straight to the ship that she was stealing.
Agreed.
So
yeah, she went to the airlock.
Yeah.
Opened it up, hit the panel, went in, and then she did the psychic attack.
Yep.
At the same time, so she did a psychic attack on some tech.
Yeah,
that ended up falling and hitting the
basically a release or
a release
launch something.
And nobody really knew that happened and until she already zoomed off in the ship.
Yeah, because it was the fastest ship in creation, basically.
Correct, and that's the reason why she needed to get it. or as opposed to the ship she was in at the beginning. So then we learn, let's see, I think at that point it cuts to a different point of view, right?
Yeah, it cuts to Farron.
Cuts to Farron, and he has determined that Ansha and Harkur are of the same race. Because Zatar and Farron are talking about the picture, the painting, right?
Yeah, well, so it starts off like they're like he sees it, and that's when he starts putting it together because he questions the validity of it. He questions a lot of other stuff, and he said then it says Farron's reading the inscription on the frame, and he says if the writing is accurate. And it's basically him and Zatar finishing each other's sentences. He's like, if the writing is accurate, Zatar's like, I'm certain it is. He said, then she, and then Zatar finishes out, is Braxin. So I thought it was a really interesting back and forth. How they were kind of finishing each other's sentences there.
Yeah. At least they're not finishing each other's sandwiches.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah, and while reading, I wrote down did Braxi break away from Asia? The answer to that, obviously, now we know is no.
Right.
So Zatar takes Farron, or tasks Farron with finding Ansha, or he will kill him.
Yeah, he's gonna kill
You're
him.
going to find her for me, or you're going to die.
Yep.
And if your psychic ability isn't good enough to find her, then that's the same as not finding her or refusing. You're going to die. So he starts looking, he starts doing his thing, and then Zatar gives him culture patterns.
Right.
For every planet in the sector. And so this is an interesting term because as far as I know, I've never heard culture pattern as a term in our world.
No, I mean,
or even in the book.
That was the first time I'd ever heard it in a book, and he said that was basically the equivalent of a psychic star map.
Right. It's like, here's how they think. This is their. Later on, we find out something from the Institute chapter that they can take, it's essentially like psychic DNA markers or something.
Yeah, basically.
And lay them over and say, hey, does this match this person?
Right.
So it's like psychic DNA. And so after he gives them the culture patterns for all the sectors, he has made progress with his probe abilities. Like, he starts to increase his power with his probing, along with these culture patterns, and ends up after 3 days, he finds her.
Yeah.
And is able to finish his telepathic connection with her. And so he discovers she is she had left the sector, crossed the Barren Zone.
Yep.
And is at a planet out there that they don't know anything about.
Right.
And I can't remember. Let's see. No, in 2 chapters from now, we're going to find out what she is doing out there. So did anything else stand out in that chapter with you? It was just kind of like
honestly, it kind of felt like we need to do a thing to figure out where she is. And we can't bring anything new in to do it. We got to use what we got.
Right.
So and honestly, to be completely honest, so nothing really stood out to me in that one. This next chapter felt like we got to fill this plot hole that's left. We got to tie this knot up and move on. Because like I read it and I was like, she really just did that to finish that up. The way we weren't going, whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, but
That's
also if that chapter wasn't there, I still would have felt that Secheva was just taken care of.
yeah. I mean, 100%. Like it's, but I also think so. Chapter 25, we get to Secheva, and we start seeing Secheva, and he's going through, like, he's all pissed off at Zatar because of everything that happened, and he's like, basically his house has fallen, and he goes to the base of the dungeons in his house. The man has like torture chambers in his basement.
Yes, it kind of reminded me of, like, what was it, the Cask of Amontillado? Is that the story where the guy takes him down,
walls up his girl behind a brick wall?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At first, like, the description of the dungeon reminded me of that, or like the pit and the pendulum.
Right.
The very end of the chapter reminded me of the scene from Game of Thrones where Cersei gets her revenge on the Dornish
Oh yeah.
lady, and with the poison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. Though this chapter was to, at first, after it's over, it was definitely there to tie up Secheva and Turok's plot line.
Yeah,
100%.
I also think that this was the fighter pilot that they captured, because it said she'd been there for a long time.
Yeah, I thought the chapter mentioned that it was Venari.
No, so he says, and then there was Venari, but she died. So he's not, because he says, and then there was Venari and the plague. So he's riddling off the stuff that kind of set up his downfall. So this person isn't Venari.
It was the other Azean.
I think this was the other Azean pilot that Zatar initially captured in the void.
Okay.
So that's what I think, because she said she was a sub-commander, fighter captain, lead scout. He no longer remembered her exact rank, but it did not matter. They had brought her to Braxi. He had broken her, squeezing military information out of her pain-wrecked body. So, to me, that signified that it had to have been that other person that they captured, because otherwise, why would they need to get military information out of her?
Right. And at the point where he goes down to her, there's absolutely nothing left.
Right.
He's just torturing her for his own enjoyment.
Yeah. And the black, I was glad that that they described the Black Death a little bit better in this chapter, because now it reminded me of almost like a symbiote, like a poisonous symbiote. Like it got on him. He's like, great, I got to cut my arm off now. And
right. And not only that, but most of their clothing was organic of some sort. So it ate through that. Yeah. And like immediately went to the body. Right. And that was an interesting thing, like seeing, like, he's stuck down there. He's like, oh, the doors, computer, open the door. And so, like, we find out after his death, it's funny. He's like, all right, I got to cut my arm off. He pulls out his sword and goes, ting, and it just bounces off. Yep. And I love how she reiterated, like, it bounced off. Yeah.
He's like, and it was like, it should have been able to, sever stone, and it just bounced off.
Right. And so we find out after his death, it cuts to Silne and Turok. And Silne is Secheva's mistress, right?
Yeah, it's his mistress.
And they plotted to kill Secheva. And they had to make it look like an accident. Right. 100% had to make it look like an accident, because if you caught guilty of killing a Braxana lord, you're dead, and anybody that helped you, any planet, whatever,
is all of it.
Yeah.
And they did it.
Yeah, Turok finally did it.
Right.
His plan earlier didn't work, but finally 80, 90, 100
Mhm.
years later, whatever, he
Yeah,
killed his dad.
however long. So he played the long game, but he was singularly focused on just killing his dad.
Yeah, but his character means jack shit. Like,
Yeah, it was, again, it was a let's wrap up this plot. That way people don't ask questions and we can press on.
yeah, at the end of the book, Turok's character meant jack squat.
Nothing.
Other than one, he did supplant Secheva. So like Secheva was no longer really in the triune, the Chimeret.
Right.
But we never got to see Turok in it, right?
Right. Yeah, it was, again, there was almost no point to that chapter other than killing off Secheva.
Yeah, and Secheva existed only to show Zatar's ability to just completely dominate and get rid of any opposition.
Yeah, agreed.
Foreign or domestic. And so that is that chapter. No more need to talk about that. I did like that Turok decided to continue taking what was his father's and is now going to continue to have Silne as one of his concubines.
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of consummated that with her and then told her that, hey, you'll serve under my mistress.
Right.
So, like, right on.
Then chapter 26, this is where we find out more. So Zatar gets word back from his contact and that he sent through the Barren Zone.
Right.
And I think it took 3 or 4 years.
3 years.
3 years, yeah. And so the contact's name, which is irrelevant really, but Aldar Natrev relays information that Ansha has been out there teaching technology to the local planets.
Yeah.
And getting them up to speed. Apparently, there's a whole master plan of Braxana
expansion.
And this is like pushing that timeline way sooner.
Right. Yeah, they weren't expected to get out there for like another 2 centuries, but because Ansha's teaching these people basically how to advance their technology faster, he's like, we got to do something about this like yesterday.
Yeah, or this is going to be come and bite us in the ass. We're going to be at war with another society, another empire or something. And so Zildar wants to get Farron out there.
Yep.
To recondition Ansha to hate the Institute. And he also intends to act his plan now he intends to enact his plan to destroy the Institute.
Right.
So he wants Farron to go and because Farron originally was part of the conditioning of Ansha, he wants him to go out there, recondition her hate away from Braxi, towards the Institute.
Well, he just wants him to undo what he originally did, and he thinks that once he can get him to undo what he originally did, that it'll take away all that other conditioning and just make her want to go after the Institute for doing that stuff to her in the first place.
Correct. And
what I thought was interesting here was how Zatar is like having a very emotional outburst, and Naina's there, and he's so comfortable with her that he's okay with her seeing him be emotional. And she's like, they're just doing like what a good couple should do. Like he's got an issue, then they're talking through it to figure it out. Instead of her just being like, well, whatever you want to do, my lord. She's like, well, let's talk about it. I thought it really showed how their relationship has grown from the very beginning of he's like, hey, I like you, you're coming with me, to now they're basically equals in the house.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen that throughout the entire book. Zatar turning Braxton beliefs and social norms, social code on its head.
Yep.
And he's not afraid of Shem R, which is
Right.
interesting. So the term Shem R comes from R, which is like one of their gods.
Right.
And so in the glossary, Vatan himself stated that, you know, it is a religious decree that women are subservient to men.
Right.
And anytime a woman commands a man, the spirit of R comes into place, and it's bad. And so that's like the term of Shemar.
Right.
And yeah, so Zatar his plan is to, I'm going to destroy the Institute and present that destruction to Ansha after Farron undoes the conditioning, reconditions her. Pick it back up. The end of chapter 26 is when Zatar decides he's going to enact his plan to destroy the Institute.
Yep.
Done. Chapter 27.
Well, hey, we got, there's one thing that before we go to 27, he mentions that he has her name. And as we know, the Braxins have this idea, you have your true name and then your name that you tell everybody. And as they're going through all this, he also says she has my name.
Right.
So I think that was important here to understand why he was so hell-bent on destroying the Institute for her.
Yeah, but I think we got that information at the halfway point.
We did, but still, at the table. We did, because like we figured out that they got each other's names whenever they were doing that whole thing, that whole initial psychic bonding thing. But I just thought it was important that they brought it up again to kind of reiterate why it was so important to her, or to him, that this happened, because he's like, I have her name and she has mine.
Yeah, they have a deep connection. So yeah, I like that you pointed out that detail there. I kind of skipped over it, I guess, because to me, reading it, I was like, oh yeah, that's not new information. You might want to unmute yourself.
But then chapter 27.
Yes.
I thought I'd pushed the button already.
You can I mean, you can sit there and talk the entire time being muted, but I mean,
it might be more entertaining that way.
It could possibly be more entertaining. Your daughter is not aware that she's in the camera.
Oh, she's 100% aware that she's in the camera. Can I help you? Okay, bye. Because I'm trying to finish this up so we can go see your friend. Okay, bye.
So yeah, chapter 27, we go to, it starts off, Zatar is like watching the horizon.
Right.
And he's like, I can't see Lornu, but I feel it's in that direction.
Yep.
And like he desperately wants to see it. But of course he's not going to. And he's so cocky. He's like, you know what? Yes. Hey, Void Space. House Zatar is coming.
Right.
Like, we are coming to the Institute.
Well, he called for a magnification field, which I thought was kind of funny. It's basically like a giant telescope, I guess. And with the magnification field, he could see it. He's like, there it is. And then he's like, it's time, and smiles. But he thinks it's so loud with this latent psychic ability that he has that it basically shoots out a thought beam across the galaxy.
And wakes up
Wakes
Lee
up the
Patsua,
director.
the director. And the director's like, wait, what?
Yeah, he's like, hold up, what was that?
What? Who thought that?
Yeah.
Then so this is where he overlays basically the psychic DNA. He's like, was it Ansha? And so he overlays it with that. It's just, nope, not her.
Yeah. Then was it Farron?
Was it Farron? No. Wait, let me go back to Farron. Okay, there's similarities here. So it's a Braxi.
Yeah. And then it kind of throws him for a loop. He's like, but there's no psychics on, there's no telepaths on Braxi.
Right.
But then he's like,
oh, shit.
What if?
He's like, okay, they're coming. He knows that the Institute is not prepared for war at all.
Not one little bit.
They weren't designed for that. The director at several times declined the Star Control's suggestions of placing like starships and defenses there. And then the attack starts to happen, and is very interesting to see the director start to understand the plan. And I don't know, I mean, being Zatar, I figure it was very intentional that the chaos and the deaths on there were going to cause so much, I guess, like, I'd use the term psychic reverb.
Yeah.
And that the psychics there would have to disconnect from each other and actually speak verbally, which removes any advantage of speed that they have.
Yeah, that I even think that he may have arrogantly wanted the director to hear him say, it's time, we're coming for you, because that just helped with the actual nature of the attack.
Yes,
because it got them up, and it got everybody up and moving, which he needed as many people mobile for them to be like, okay, there's too much psychic chaos going on to the point that it's painful. We have to disconnect from each other.
Yeah, and this same tactic is used later on the planet Selu.
Yeah,
as well. And then they start noticing that some of the drone ships start suiciding into the buildings.
Yeah, into the force field.
And so at first they try to stop a couple in different places. And
but they're not very good at shooting.
Right. They're not good at shooting, and they're not focus firing.
Right.
And so then he says, focus fire on single ships. We have to make sure to eliminate as many that are going to hit the force field as we can. You know, we're going to concede that some are going to hit, but at least we're going to be able to stop a couple of them. And then he runs off to the archives, right? And he's like, well, we have to save this. At least we can save the archives.
Yeah, which he calls the true meaning for the Institute.
Yeah, and then that's information, right?
Yep.
So if you think about it in real world, one of the most damaging attacks or damaging things in war is loss of knowledge.
Yeah.
And so I remember reading at times, it was a few years ago in the Middle East. I think it was either Al Qaeda or the Taliban, and they were like burning old libraries. And so that's a great, it's a horrible thing to do, but it's a great way to limit the information. Like if you can limit the information and knowledge of the people you're trying to rule, then you're going to have you know, you're going to be able to keep them under your thumb
Right.
pretty damn well.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Keep
not even that.
keep them
Like
stupid.
I can relate a little bit personal to this one because like if so my grandfather didn't really speak a lot about his military background about the time that because he was drafted during the Korean conflict. So he never really talked about it. So we really don't like none of us really know, like even my mom like doesn't really know about like his military history because he never talked about it. So we did a freedom of information request for the National Archives because he'd been out for so long that all of his stuff was at the National Archives. There was a fire at the National Archives about 10 or 15 years ago, and it destroyed thousands and thousands and thousands of records. So the only record that they even have of my grandfather serving is basically, yes, we know he served, but we have nothing. Like they don't have his DD-214. There's nothing about his military record because it was all destroyed in a fire.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was going to be part of y'all's like memoirs of him. Like,
Well, so I've got his flag from his funeral, and I was going to build a shadow box, and using his DD-214, I was going to be able to go back and find like any awards or ribbons that he had gotten that he'd been awarded. So I was going to build a shadow box with the one picture I have of him in his uniform, and then have his ribbons and medals there. So
like replicates.
yeah, you can go back because you can just go on, but you can go on Amazon and buy medals. That's why all these people get away with like stolen valor stuff. You can just go and buy the medals. But if you can go on different websites and punch in the year, like in which which theater they were in, branch of service, etc., and you can actually get a replica of that medal or that ribbon.
Oh, cool.
Also, I was going to build that out, but now we are completely unable to do so because of a fire that destroyed records. So,
Gotcha.
So I can see why that was so important to the director to protect his archives.
And so when he's there, the self-destruct sequence starts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, hold on, how
Right.
and why? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to think of what would have caused this self-destruct sequence to go through.
Yep.
And apparently it was something he was unaware of, he forgot existed, or no, the computer reminded him that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it was if the force field was hit in this timing,
Yep.
it would set the self-destruct sequence to start. And he's like, wait,
like,
how
why?
the hell did he know this?
Right.
And I'm Zatar had to have pulled it either from Farron or his time when he went there.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think there was also yeah, here it is. It says so he sends out like a mental sweep of the archives real quick to see if there's anybody down there. And he says, there was a noise from the other end of the archives. He searched for the source, but could see nothing out of the ordinary. Somewhere between the banks of computers, squeezed beneath the walkways, buried in rock, perhaps in the files themselves, someone had planted something, and he, Il Pazu, had caused it to go off. So Zatar had been, decades before, had been at the Institute to get that other information because that's how he knew about Farron. And again, dude playing the long game here, plants a device in the archives for this moment.
Right. Just to ensure that the director is killed.
Yes. Like that is like so nuts to me. Like to have that level of patience and planning.
Right. And to know that, yes, I will ensure that he will be there.
Right.
So
that's great. And then whenever
maybe a little plot armor there, and
Probably.
nudging to make sure he's there.
Probably.
So,
but it's I don't think it's not like overtly done, because we all know how important the Institute was to the director. He'd been in charge of it for, it almost feels like 2 centuries at this point, because he was already old whenever all this stuff started, and then this whole thing with Anja and Zatar has been going on for at least, feels like about 100 years at this point.
Right, because he was like 120.
Yeah. And so this is like another 100 years later. So he's got to be 200 years old. But yeah, it's great.
I mean, it's been 10,000 years since Harkur began, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, but I love that. The very next thing we get is Zatar asking the computer, "Is it done?" They're like 97%, and he's like, "Yeah, even the computer doesn't want to give me." Like, it's almost like the computer's scared of him to give him like too solid of a number. He's like, yeah, 97%. It's like, eh.
Is it what was it? 97% of the attack was over?
No, he said, is it done yet? He said 90. Then the computer responds 97% probability.
Okay.
That it was successful. So yeah, so this was like the one thing he did is all on his own. Like, he didn't use Nain, he didn't use anybody. And he made sure that Anja was going to get blamed for it. That way she could be credited with the death of the director.
I love that the computer right there, right before it says detonation sequence stage 3, fission.
Yeah. like not boom, not just fission.
but I mean, that is the computer announcing that before it happened too.
I'll say it. So I kind of took that to, like, remember back on the other one, whenever the other captive like crashed that ship into the thing that was just like detonation. Yeah, impact. I kind of took that to mean, like, whenever I see fission, I think like nuclear level reaction there.
Right.
So whenever I saw fission, I was like, oh wow, that was a giant explosion. Like, that wasn't just a boom, that was like nuclear bomb level going off. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything
done.
The whole of Asian society and genetics and research is gone. And so yeah, that's fun to see the end. And we never saw the beginning of it earlier in the book.
Right.
And so we come in the middle, then we see the destruction of it. And so, like, to me, this is the end of the war between Braxi and Azia, because I mean,
the Institute's gone.
The Institute is gone.
And that's their whole everything.
Yeah. And so from there, Zatar is ready to finish things up with Anja.
Yep, he's thinking, I'm ready for you, my vendetta mate.
And so this is the final chapter, not the epilogue, but this is the final chapter of the book. And it is a wild ride. So
yes,
starts off, Zatar is waiting on the planet Dokul for news of Farron's dealings with Anja. He's being brought, he's being serviced by the governor of Dokul. He's being brought through the palace to his own room, where he's going to be waiting for Farron to return.
Yep.
But upon entering his room in his bed, he notices there's a body lying in it, motionless. And as he approaches more, it's been like strapped up and like in stasis, and it's a dead body.
Well, he gets like this grand tour, and then he basically convinces the governor that he doesn't need him there. He wants to go make sure that somebody of stature accepts the shipment for the museum. So he's already been
He's annoyed that the governor is still there.
Yeah, so Zatar's already shown off the portrait once because too many people knew about it. So he's already unveiled it. And he's basically taking this portrait on a galaxy tour. And so this is stop number 2 on showing off this portrait. And he shoves off the governor, and that's when he comes back around. He's like, oh, there's a body. Or he recognizes as a body. And these next few pages are intense.
Yeah.
They're just flat out intense.
So he discovers as he gets closer that it's the body of Farron.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, how did this get here? And then Ansha starts talking and comes out from the other room.
Well, before she says anything, he sees the body, and it says he whipped around, sword sliding free of its sheath, even as he moved, still glinted in the dim, irregular lighting, and he brought his own blade up, guarding his face from the coming thrust. A strong arm, an able enemy, and purpose like electricity flowing through his blade, through his hand and into his body. So he sees the body, instantly turns with his sword up to deflect, and Anja's getting ready to stab him. Right. Yeah, and Anja's there to stab him, and I love the next one. She says, "Any slower and you'd have died," and he replied, "Any slower and I'd have deserved to die."
Very, very Zatar of him to say.
100%. And then they start talking.
Yes. And so this is where she finds out that she is a descendant of Harkur and his lover.
Yep.
One of his lovers. I wrote Azean lover, but she's not Azean.
Yeah, because that wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah. Ansha then promises. Ansha and Zatar start talking, and you'll probably have more details for this, but the base of it, she promises she can make Zatar the best ruler that anybody has ever seen. That Braxi or any planet has ever seen. Basically, I will give you the power of both of our societies.
Because Farron had basically told her, it's almost like Farron's last jab at Zatar.
Right. But he knew that already. Like, he knew that she could possibly awaken something in him. And so Farron went and did the process on Ansha.
Yeah, Farron undid all of his original programming.
Right. And now,
and then she killed him.
Yes, she did kill him. But that was like a mercy. Like, he is like, can you kill me now?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, because he didn't want Zatar to kill him.
Right. He's like, I can't go back to that. It's you or him, but I'm dead. And I'm sorry for what I did to you. So will you kill me? And so we will get to so they start the process of this. So it starts off with Ansha viewing the destruction of Selu.
Yep.
And so 5 billion people lived on Selu and were killed.
Yeah, they did the planet kill thing, which I thought was actually kind of cool that they described how the planet killing thing worked.
Yeah,
I thought they blew it up like the Death Star, but they don't.
No, they don't. So what was pictured in my mind was, okay, so the basics of it was there were 2,000 fighters that came out of the starships. They surrounded the planet almost like equidistant
yep.
spots, and then connected with each other. and then essentially started pumping the atmosphere out of the planet.
Yeah, it kills because it says it takes 6 days and it kills everything.
Yes. And it reminded me of the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie when Nova Corps came with their ships.
Oh, yeah.
And so like that was the image that I had of them surrounding the planet.
So mine was even worse than that. So do you remember Spaceballs?
Yes.
Whenever they hooked the giant vacuum cleaner up to the planet.
Yeah.
That's where my head went with it. I was like, oh, that's what they're doing.
The spaceships Voltroned into a vacuum cleaner.
That was where my head went, dude.
And so now we have a mirror image of the attack on the Institute, where Ansha and her psychics, they were connected, and they had to actually disconnect from the population because of the pain and the psychic. And she survived from it, but her psychics did not. Several of them committed suicide. One tore his eyeballs from his face. There were another two she found where one killed one, one killed another, and then killed himself.
And her medic was on the planet.
Yes, let's see. He was on the planet teaching them his medical expertise.
Right.
And so she went down to the planet afterwards to find Tao, her physician. And the 5 billion lost lives of the Selu didn't bother her much. But the loss of her physician was immense to her because he was the only person that was ever loyal to her.
Right.
That she ever got a sense of loyalty, like genuine loyalty. Farron comes out now.
Yep, Farron, that's exactly when Farron finds her, which I thought was a little like, really, like he finds her at this exact moment, but whatever.
They have a telepathic connection.
Yeah,
it's deeper than that because of the conditioning.
Right.
It's not unbelievable. It's more believable than Zatar knowing that the director was going to be in the archives.
I'll agree with that. I'll agree there.
I mean, that you have to suspend your disbelief for a little bit that that device has been hiding for decades just to kill
the one guy.
That one guy and make sure that one guy is dead. Like how did he know that the director was going to go to that room?
Right.
Let's see. So Farron is sorry for the dead air there. Farron starts to undo his conditioning work. He reveals that Ansha was intended to bear a Braxin child for Lee Patsua to study. That was part of her conditioning. Now that Patsua and the Institute are destroyed, it invalidates any part of her conditioning tied to the Institute or Patsua.
Right.
However, the rest from the years of her living with that conditioning, she has essentially conditioned herself apart from it to act in certain ways. And so now it's just her fighting her growing up instincts beyond his own condition, the conditioning. And I wrote down here, page 472, Farron's Revolution. Let's see here. Get to that page. I'm right there. the all right. I wish I would have written down where in here it I did write a note that says it references back to the Braxy use of image or charisma from page 466. And okay, yeah, here it goes. We are not the lords of creation, though we've convinced ourselves that we are. Sensitivity is a weakness, not a strength, and I'm convinced that nature abhors it. Think of the predator stalking his prey. What good does it do him to be psychic if the intensity of his hunger acts as a warning to his chosen victim? How does an animal manage to hide when its very fear is a beacon leading to its presence? Let me put my glasses on so I can read better. Only the emergence of an advanced intellect allows us to encourage such a weakness, and even so, we need all the tools we can muster to turn it from a handicap to an asset. The disciplines. The carefully controlled community. Control, Ansha, that's the key. A control that the primitive mind locks, for which reason primitive society fears the psychic as much as it worships him. It claims him a seer, it clothes him in honor, but it binds him in rituals which set him apart, and more often than not sees to it that he dies without issue. It says the Braxana are to be congratulated, for they are the only people honest enough to kill their psychics outright. They fear telepathy with all the strength of primitive instinct and will not endure the telepath in their midst, and that is their weakness, which you will exploit in order to regain your freedom. So this goes back to when he talks about the vanity of the Braxana being the telepaths.
Right.
Like essentially Zatar, he has the innate ability of a telepath that he can't bring it to his forefront, but it's there in the fact that they're using their charisma and their image
right
to control the minds of others.
Right.
Because like other people are afraid in awe and afraid of them because of their stature and how awesome they look.
Right.
Like, you know, in jiu-jitsu, if I'm going up against somebody that's 280 pounds and a former celebrated state wrestling champion, my mind automatically starts playing games with me.
Right.
They have that advantage now.
Yeah.
And kind of now, not in our world, it's not truly telepathy, but you know, that's what I was reading into that one. And so I thought it was interesting at that point. Zatar was the one who awoke Ansha's power.
Yep.
And now Ansha is awakening Zatar's power and imprints her hatred on him at the same time.
Yeah.
And she warns him of that. Says, look, I will do this for you, but only if you agree to it, because
this is going to happen.
This is like, you will have this, but you will hate yourself and everything for it.
Yeah. And
she basically
warns it's going to take away everything you love.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you will no longer love anything. You'll hate everything, but you will have all the power and be able to control everything. Like you'll essentially become the ruler of the known universe. You're going to have the capability, the power over it. And so before I get to him coming back and talking with Laresh, did you have anything?
Just that whenever he basically pulls her in like in a lover's embrace whenever they do this.
Ansha?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he he was like, because he even said at one point that he wanted to have a child with her.
Yes.
And so whenever through all this, he like grabs her and like brings her in this lover's embrace. And as they're going through all of this, and he's basically he's combating all the stuff psychically. Like it even says, like, you know, the anger, he tries to fight her anger with his calmness internally. And he's I love this part. He's like, why have we denied this thing? Why have we feared it? And she whispers back, you'll see why. like don't just hang on, we're getting there.
Yeah. Do you think, so before we get to the reason why he hates everything, do you think that either in this moment or earlier, because we know earlier at their meeting when they've had their first deep telepathic connection, afterwards Ansha feared that she possibly pair bonded him.
Right.
I still think it could have possibly been back then, but after this, do you think that they are pair bonded?
Absolutely. I think that's when they consummated it, if you will.
Yeah, well, I mean, here that term was here where it says, she says, by your will, Pretierra, the choice was your own. Remember that. And then the telepathic message here says, the flavor of desire, the touch of consummation.
Yep.
And so, even though it doesn't state it, I think they're pair bonded, and which we know is an Azean thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so when he comes to, and we don't know how many days it's been long enough that he's atrophied a little bit, so he can't stand. Ansha is gone.
Yep.
Laresh is taking care of him. And I remember we were talking about Laresh and how many children she had with him.
Right.
And you think you had said you thought she only gave him one child, and I thought she gave him multiple. Here it confirmed, she risked her life over and over and over again, giving him, children.
Yeah.
And then he's repulsed by her embrace and her thoughts. Yeah. So like he can hear her, he can read her thoughts now, and finds out, one, her thoughts, and then all the thoughts of his lovers are counter. They could be. It's not that they're necessarily counter to Braxton beliefs or general beliefs, but they're definitely counter to Braxton male beliefs. Right. So Zatar, over his life, has sought out women that fully devote themselves to him. Yet he does not fully devote himself to any one particular person or woman, outside of his obsession with Ansha. So this feeling here is repulsive to him, because he now realizes, it's like, wait, they do that? Ugh. Don't touch me.
Well, it said the fire burned through him the fire burned him through the contact. So that's a touch discipline that he now has to figure out.
Right.
But I also thought it was funny, is like there was a female essence in her, but not like Ansha's, not something to savor, but an unwholesome, unclean sensation. So that goes back to that whole pair bonding thing. Is like, once they pair bond, that's it. Like that, there's nobody else for them once they pair bond. And that right there, he's like, why would I want her when I had Ansha?
Right. And so there's the pair bonding, and then there's also her hatred towards Braxton. right?
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that. It's like,
Mhm.
I hate these people.
Yeah.
Now he can no longer fake his love
Mm-hmm.
for all the women he spent his life cultivating. And so his ultimate desire for complete control and power has ruined him.
Yep.
And I love the fact that, so they didn't necessarily team up and destroy the war. Zatar fully ended the war between the Braxins and the Azeans
Right.
himself, which left Ansha, which he felt a duty towards, and she still felt the duty towards him to destroy each other. And they effectively destroyed each other as well.
Yeah.
So Zatar destroyed Ansha by killing off everything that she was doing off on her own,
Mm-hmm.
but also saved her by sending Farron out there to undo the conditioning work he did. Then she comes back with the promise that she'll make him the most powerful ruler ever seen, and graciously warns him that he will be destroyed. He accepts it, and then afterwards is like, well, I have all this power, but
now I hate everything.
Now I hate it.
Yeah. Because he even says, you have destroyed me.
Yeah, that isn't that the last thing.
I think so. I think that's like the very last line is like, oh no,
yeah,
it was like
it's not the last line.
Yeah.
You have destroyed me, my enemy.
Right.
And so he still views her as an enemy, but yeah, I like earlier on he does yell out her name after he realizes what's going on. He's like, any contact we have will be tainted by my experience. Hacha!
Yeah.
It's like, why didn't you tell me more? Like,
right.
It's like, you agreed to it, you dumbass. And so that's the end of that story.
That's the end of that story.
All right, done. That was a great book, right?
I mean, the epilogue I thought just gave us just enough to really help understand how everything started.
Yeah, I really did enjoy the epilogue. I wrote just over a page of notes on it, just because it gave us the backstory.
Yeah.
It allowed us to understand the war and why the war was there. And so we're introduced. It's a letter from Dial to her brother Bale. For some reason, my mind kept reading Beryl, but it was like Bale. And so Dial is from a planet Zamor. She was sent on the first space travel mission. Zamor is ruled by a class of people called the Mristi.
Yeah,
and they're like religious, and they definitely oppress the women.
Yeah, they've basically forbidden sexual contact.
Yeah, which is
weird. How did they? Yeah, it's like I read that. I'm like, but how are you going to keep your society alive?
They're just going to rape. They're going to rape the women. The women are going to have the babies, and then they're going to just oppress and shun the women because they had sexual contact.
Well, and so something I kind of laughed at it. I didn't laugh isn't the right word, but I kind of shook my head. Like whenever they kidnap her, they talk about this child 43 that was her brother's friend that was pregnant and had a kid, and they're like, well, to punish her for knowing about it, we're going to put her on this spaceship. And they're like, well, do you want us to sterilize her first? And they're like, and the guy said she wouldn't dare get pregnant. I'm like, it's like she has the choice.
Right?
Like this is not. It's not like she just can sit there and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm just not going to get pregnant. That's not how that works.
Yeah, and she was the only woman on the ship.
Yeah.
Like and it was multiple years.
Yeah.
That they went, and there were like several, like 5 stages of
Whatever that propulsion was.
cryostasis or something. And so she was raped by the men multiple times. Prior to the last leg of it, the navigation got out of alignment, and they crashed on the planet Lugostine.
Yep.
And they're like, they were the premier society in that area of space. They had an empire that expanded multiple planets. They weren't a warlike people. They were peaceful. They wanted to maintain peace.
Yeah, they nursed her back to health and tried to teach her their language.
Right. They recognized that her language was more in line with the Braxi language, so they speak Braxin to her.
Yep.
They wanted to know where she was from.
Mm-hmm.
They set her up with all the technology and star maps to try to determine where she was and where her planet was in relation to them. She found it, but did not tell them because it was oddly close to where they were.
And she was scared they were going to go back and like they were going to align themselves with the other rulers.
Go align themselves with the Maristi, and then she'd be a slave again and all that stuff. So she doesn't tell them. She ends up being kidnapped, and she finds out that it's the Braxi that kidnapped her, and they brought her to Barrows. Now, we know what Barrows is because of earlier when Zatar went there and found the painting. She met with Harker, met Viton, who was Harker's successor, and it was very interesting to see the noticeable physical difference between Harker and Viton. Like, Harker is olive skin and red hair.
Yep.
Viton is pale skin, black hair, very plain.
What we think
like
of,
we know the Braxana.
Yep.
And so, let's see. Harker knew about her. And so after a month, he didn't force her into anything.
Right.
But after a month of her being there, she kind of succumbs to the worldly pleasures and his charisma.
Well, and she had even said something like, even like having people help her dress, like because they were so much more physical and touchy that it was foreign to her. She didn't understand why they were touching so much. But she said after all that time, the touching felt less weird. So it was like they didn't even hug because they were so like, there was like no physical contact allowed. So she had to even get used to people like touching her at all, which was kind of sad.
Yeah. And so like she's still, so their ship crashed on Lugostine. So she's like stuck, right? You know, I wouldn't necessarily say she's a slave to anything anymore, but she's still stuck.
Right.
At the whims of whoever has transportation abilities and things like that. But being on Barrows, it's so vastly different from being on Zamor. And even more different than being on the ship. You know, so
well, she had free reign to do whatever she wanted.
Right. And so she wasn't used to being pampered. So she likes being pampered. And then Harker is like, he makes it obvious that he likes her.
Right.
And he's attracted to her like exoticness. And so it took about a month that she succumbed to him.
Right.
Then she stayed around for a few more months.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, look, I'm going to reveal, like, come here, I have something to show you.
Mm-hmm.
And brings her down and shows her this ship that's very reminiscent of the Explorer that she went.
Well, I read that to
there.
where like Dave actually went and found it and basically rebuilt it, but with Braxy technology.
Yeah. I mean, to her, it looked exact.
Mhm.
She's like, this is oddly like the Explorer I came here on, but
Mhm.
these are differences right here.
Right.
So when I was reading it, I was like, I don't know if it's the same ship or if it's one of the Braxy ships, and somehow the Zamors and the Zamorans and the Braxy are way more connected than we thought.
Right.
I mean, we know their language was already kind of very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, how did you know? He said, I've been knowing.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you want to go back, you know, you can take it. And so she does take it. And this part is, I feel like Friedman left out something here because it was kind of confusing as to where she went, right?
Right.
She goes back and she's like, okay, there's no sun in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no star in the Zamor area, apparently.
Right.
It's very dark. And she didn't go back to the planet Zamor. That wasn't where she crashed.
Right.
Where she crashed ended up being where her brother was.
Mm-hmm.
And her brother, and I think it said, let's see here. This was information in the glossary, but the Exodus. So it talks about the Exodus from Zamor. And so the immigration from Zamor to Asia, it is estimated that nearly 100,000 began the journey, which took half a standard year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, she crashed on that planet,
right,
and was found by her brother, who pulled from the wreckage. And then he mentioned that half of their number now was left.
Yeah, because they start talking about the death winds.
Yeah, so there's about 50,000 Zamorans now that live on what is now Asia. And she didn't name it until the very last sentence of the book.
I know.
So they're on that planet, which becomes Asia. And I love that they explained a couple of things. So, like, Ansha Lu Miteth is her name, right?
Right.
And so Harker calls Dial Miteth, which is like a term of endearment.
Yeah.
And so then Liu was the name of the ship. Is I picked that up just because they were like, oh, and you know, the Liu didn't have whatever, and then the surnames or the secondary names become the ship numbers become the secondary names of the Azeans. They're like, all right, from now on, we're the Azean race, and our secondary names are the number of the ship that we came on. And so that's how they made the families.
Right.
And then Mateth just got passed down from that because so Dial was called Mateth. I don't know how they knew that.
Well, I think she survived.
It was in the letter.
It was also a letter. Yeah.
It was in the letter. Okay. Duh. All right. Yeah. As soon as I said I didn't know, I was like, wait, no, it was a letter she wrote to her brother that he read. So before Dial dies, though, she does have the baby that she conceived with Harker.
Yep. And they name it Hasha.
And her brother names it Hasha. And so Ansha is a descendant of Hasha. So her secondary name was Liu, which was the ship that Hasha and Dial came on. And then Mateth was the term of endearment that Harker gave to Dial.
Yep.
And yeah, it was a good book.
I really enjoyed it. It was not I nothing that I really fully expected to happen actually happened. Like it was one of those things like Zatar's planning was so far in advance of anything that I would have thought of that just like I was surprised by him a couple of times.
Yeah, I thought it was very hard to predict things that were going to happen in the story, just because the way she tells it, the way the narration goes, you have all these short stories.
Yeah.
So, like, the only thing you could predict is, okay, is the war going to be ended?
Right.
Is there going to be peace? How does the relationship between Ansha and Zatar resolve itself? So, yeah, I don't have any problem recommending this book to anybody to read. Obviously, if rape or misogyny or the patriarch are triggers for anybody, they probably don't want to read it.
Well, but it's way less than what was in Game of Thrones. Like any of the books.
True. So... And I don't know. I mean, I did find myself rooting for Zatar and Ansha at different times, but hating both of the societies that they belong to, right?
Yeah, and I kind of got the feeling that would have been accurate amongst the characters themselves, though. Like, Zatar didn't trust any of the other Braxins. Like, he continually went to people that were not full-blood Braxin to be his trusted advisors.
Correct. Yeah.
So
he didn't want he was, even though he subscribed to some immoral or whatever beliefs, I don't think his beliefs were as consistently immoral as like Braxana beliefs and social codes.
Right.
So he's kind of like, he's not a hero, but he's the
lesser of two evils.
Yeah, the lesser of two evils. He's been indoctrinated into this belief system, and hard to let go of some of the things, but is vastly different from it,
right,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
And the same thing with Ansha, and just the talk of genetics and everything, and then basically comes down to all of them are kind of related. Most of Azean is gonna have a ancestral connection to Harker, who was the first Braxin soul leader.
Right.
So it was very interesting to see that dynamic play out and not really have a hero in a book.
Yeah, that was kind of something that was strange, was that like there was not we have a protagonist, but they're not like a great protagonist. Like you wouldn't go, this guy is awesome, I love everything about him. Like it's kind of like the whole time you're like, okay, this guy's like, he's still kind of not a great guy,
right?
But he's the best one they got.
Like, yeah, you wouldn't be like, I want to be that person,
right?
I want these features of this person. It's like in Game of Thrones, I don't think anybody necessarily wants to completely be any of the Lannisters,
right?
They'll probably want to be Jon Snow,
Yeah.
Like if anybody was anybody, it'd be Jon Snow.
Right.
It is almost the only character in Game of Thrones that anybody would be like, that's who I want to be.
I don't know, man. We Tyrion kind of grows on you towards like after a little while. You realize that, but I came to like Tyrion.
Yeah, I mean, I did too, and even Jamie Lannister. There's, it's like, okay, I can understand. I mean, the Hound as well. You're like, okay, well, all right, he is a rough and gruff, and he's done some mean shit, but I see how tortured and shitty, his life has been, and I can see how he got to that point
for sure.
But
yeah, this is definitely a read.
Yeah,
definitely a read.
I'm excited. Now, I'm excited to hear if you would read any of C.S. Friedman's other books.
I think I would. I definitely would. I would not. This would not be a one and done for me.
Okay, so they are. I mean, I've obviously mentioned the Cold Fire trilogy, and in that one, you'll if you read that one, you'll see the theme of the protagonist and antagonist have like that vendetta mate kind of relationship. So you'll see that play out through those three books, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
So don't want to give anything else away. So I'll stop talking about that. And I guess we can. Our next book, we decided to read a full trilogy. So I'll let you discuss that real quick.
Well, I wish I would have brought the books up with me, but you have your copy there. So for the next book we're going to read is by my buddy Wesley Miller. So Wesley is a friend of mine. Our daughters played soccer together back in Georgia, and he wrote that first book is The Heart of the Machine. And he also wrote two more books, The Soul of the Machine and The Mind of the Machine. I think a very different take on kind of a sci-fi genre. So it's really more sci-fi than fantasy. It's very, very interesting. And I don't want to get too much into it. But it's a very neat take on kind of a post-apocalyptic landscape, but not like way far in the future. It's like something happens that's giant and bad, and the recovery from that, but with a dedicated bad guy.
Give 3 keywords that you would describe it.
Technology. I'll go with family and resilience.
Okay.
Those are the 3 I'm going to go with.
And where can people pick up a copy of this?
So if you're in Central Georgia, you can pick it up locally at some of the bookstores, and there's a coffee shop called Between Friends that his wife runs that has like local author books, and obviously she has his book there. It is available on Amazon. You can get the whole trilogy on Amazon. But yeah, so that's the next book. My daughter's actually read the first book of that series and actually really liked it. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with more people.
And we will. They're rather short books.
They're short. They're pretty easy reads.
A little over 200 pages each.
Yep.
So we're gonna take 2 episodes per book. We're just gonna run through the trilogy.
Yep.
So our next 6 episodes of books are gonna be on this series.
Yep. So we'll run through it, and who knows? Maybe I haven't even told you this. Maybe we'll have a special guest at the end of it. I'm actually about to go meet up with the author now.
Okay. Yeah, maybe your daughter will be the special guest. Yeah.
Maybe.
She wrote part of the book. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that'll be fun. Maybe we will have a special guest at the end.
Yep. I'll let you know. I'll let you know offline once how this goes.
All right, Mike. Well, hey, awesome second book, and look forward to the next ones.
Absolutely.
All right, you have a good day.
You as well, Ben. Later.